Hi, this is Ken Elliott. When I'm floating around the universe, I always try to tune in to Rob McConnell.
Hey ho there, Trinity Frog on Sesame Street. When I want to find out what's going on with UFOs or ghosts, I listen to the X Zone with Rob McConnell.
This is Les Corrigan from Target Internet Development. You're listening to Rob McConnell on the X Zone Radio Show.
This is John Hogue, prophecy scholar, and you're listening to Rob McConnell in the X Zone.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Do you believe in magic?
And welcome back, everyone. Speaking about magic, I think we've solved our problem here. It's funny what happens when you switch a number around in an area code, isn't it? So let me just make sure that everything is right here. All right, Exo Nation, let's do this together. The radio show that stays together, calls together.
Hello?
Dr. Michael Cremo.
Yes.
Hey, it's Rob McConnell, X-Zone Radio. How are you tonight, sir?
I'm doing just fine, Rob. How are you and all your listeners?
Oh, we're doing fine. I apologize for getting to you a little late. We had a bit of a glitch here, but here we are together. And first of all, I'd like to let our listeners know about you. Dr. Michael Cremo is the author of Forbidden Archeology. He's also known as the Forbidden Archaeologist and is hailed as a groundbreaking research pioneer and international authority on archaeological anomalies. His landmark bestseller, Forbidden Archaeology, first published way back in 1993, has already been translated into 26 languages and has challenged the very foundation of Darwinism evolution. Michael continues to, if you'll pardon the pun, dig up enigmatic discoveries in the fossil record and shake up accepted paradigms, exploring famous archaeological sites around the world, journeying to sacred places in India, appearing on national television shows in the United States or other countries, lecturing at mainstream science conferences, or speaking to alternative gatherings of global intelligentsia. I could say a lot more, but let's get on to the interview with Michael Cremo. And Michael, thanks very much for coming on the show. And, I've been following your career over the years, and I must say, it's nice to know that you're still shaking things up.
Yeah, I'm still doing that. I'm still lecturing at scientific conferences, lecturing to groups of the general public, still writing. So I actually like every part of what I do. I like doing the research, digging into the old archives and finding scientific reports that aren't very well known, visiting archaeological sites. I like the writing. I like the speaking. I like every part of it.
What is the usual explanation for the origin of human beings, and how does your evidence relate to it?
Most scientists today believe that human beings like us came into existence less than 200,000 years ago. And they would say before 200,000 years ago, there were no human beings like us on this planet. They would say there were only more primitive, ape-like human ancestors. And that's the view that you see in the textbooks today. But I decided to look beyond the textbooks. I decided to look into the original scientific reports from the time of Darwin to the present in many different languages, not just English. And when I did that, I was amazed to find there were archaeologists, geologists, and other scientists who were reporting discoveries of human bones, human artifacts, and human footprints going back much further in time than 200,000 years ago, in some cases going back many millions of years. So I collected all of these cases and put them in the book Forbidden Archeology. And the significance of this evidence is that it contradicts the now dominant ideas about human origins and antiquity, which means we need to start looking for new explanations.
How different, in your opinion, is the truth from what we are being taught and told?
Well, in some cases, the truth is quite radically different.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, most scientists today believe that humans like us appeared less than 200,000 years ago.
Right.
So some of the discoveries that contradict that idea are relatively close to what's now accepted. For example, there's the case of the discoveries that were made at a place called Hueyatlaco in Mexico in the 1970s. At that location, American and Mexican archaeologists uncovered stone tools of a kind that were normally attributed to human beings like us, not any kind of ape man. And they wanted to know how old these things were, so they brought a team of geologists to date the site using many different scientific methods. And the geologists, including Virginia Steen McIntyre, got an age of between 250,000 and 300,000 years for the site, which means, well, you've got a human presence going back that far. So that's relatively close to what most scientists now accept. So you could say that part of the truth is not so radically different from what is being accepted as the truth about human antiquity today. But there are discoveries that go much further back in time than that. For example, in 1979, Mary Leakey found footprints at a place called Laetoli in the country of Tanzania in East Africa. The footprints were found in layers of solidified volcanic ash about 3,700,000 years old. According to Mary Leakey's original report, which was published in National Geographic magazine, the footprints were indistinguishable from modern human footprints. So if that is true, we've got evidence for a human presence going back almost 4 million years. And that begins to become a little more radically different than what we're being told today. And there are discoveries that are even more radically different from what we are being told today is the truth about human antiquity. For example, in the 19th century, gold was discovered in California, and to get the gold, miners went there and dug tunnels into the sides of mountains like Table Mountain in California. And deep inside those tunnels, the miners found human bones and human artifacts. And these were found in layers of rock that modern geologists consider to be about 50 million years old. It belongs to the geological period they call the Eocene. These discoveries were reported to the scientific world by a prominent scientist, Dr. J.D. Whitney, who was the chief government geologist of California, and his report was published by Harvard University in the year 1880, but we don't hear about these discoveries anymore today because they so radically contradict the current concept of human antiquity. And there are discoveries that go back even further in time. In the year 1852, Scientific American reported that a beautiful metallic vase had been taken from solid rock about 15 feet deep in Dorchester, which is part of the Boston metropolitan area in the United States. And modern geologists tell us that the age of the formations at that place, at that depth, is about 600 million years. So that is even more radically different from what we're now being told is the truth about the history of our human species.
Well, we know that history lies. Well, not history lies, but the people who write history lie. For example, a much more recent lie is that Christopher Columbus discovered the Americas. Well, we know for a fact that, the Irish monks were over in North America, the Vikings were in North America way before Christopher Columbus, and yet our kids are still being taught in school that Christopher Columbus discovered America. And I'm sure that this goes back through archaeology, paleontology, and every other discipline. And it must be very frustrating for you, Michael, because you are the guy who is spearheading the movement to set the record straight. How do we proceed in correcting the record?
Well, I think the first thing is that people have to be willing to listen to new information. I think that is the first step. And as far as I personally am concerned, I know, well, it would be nice to live at a time or place when the ideas that I'm personally convinced about, the ideas that make most sense to me, were accepted by the majority of people and around me. That would be nice, but sometimes we don't have that luxury. Sometimes we may have to maintain our convictions when all the big authorities and scientific institutions are promoting something else. So that's just part of the territory. However, if we're talking about how to change ideas, I think one thing we have to look at is the education system. If we give the supporters of the now dominant theories a monopoly in the education system, then it's very hard for ideas to change. I think the proper approach in the education system would be to acknowledge that, say on this question of human antiquity, to acknowledge today most scientists believe that humans like us appeared less than 200,000 years ago on this planet by a process of Darwinian evolution from more primitive, ape-like human ancestors. That would be a factual statement. However, it should, in the same textbook, be neutrally and objectively acknowledged that there are some scientists, some researchers who are proposing different ideas, and then just leave it up to the students to make up their minds about these things. Sort of like in our normal life, we wouldn't accept, say, the government telling us we could only listen to one radio station or only buy one kind of car and all other options are forbidden, basically. We wouldn't really accept that. But now in most countries, we're accepting the governments through their education ministries, telling us that we can only consider one idea in the education system. Only one idea can be taught to our children. I think in countries that consider themselves democratic and free, there should be acknowledgement of diversity of opinion, if diversity of opinion actually exists, and I think it does. So I think that is one thing that I believe would help, that government shouldn't step in and give a monopoly to one group of scientists, even if it's the majority, the big majority of scientists who may favor a certain idea. So that would be a big step. Now, until something like that happens, then we're just fortunate that we have some freedom of expression on the internet, on radio, on television to some extent, where alternative ideas can be presented outside the channels in the education system that are controlled to a large extent by supporters of the dominant theories. They've managed to convince governments to give them a monopoly, but they don't have a monopoly in the wider system of communication that people have access to at this time. So I think you're doing a good service to the public in airing alternative ideas for their consideration. I think that's a good thing, and there are others like you who are also doing that. And I just think it's up to people to make up their minds about these things and perhaps eventually influence their elected representatives to do something about getting some balance and diversity in the education system itself.
What is your alternative, or what are your alternatives to the Darwin theory of human evolution, Michael?
Well, that's a very good question, Rob, and it's a question many people asked me after they read my book, Forbidden Archeology, where I presented a lot of evidence that contradicts the current Darwinian explanation of human origins. They asked me, well, if you've got this evidence that contradicts that theory, then what are you proposing to put in its place? So to answer that question from my readers, I came out with another book titled Human Devolution, a Vedic Alternative to Darwin's Theory. One thing I'd like to say is that a lot of my ideas on these topics are inspired by my study of the ancient Sanskrit writings of India. I'm a practitioner of a type of yoga called Bhakti Yoga, and part of my practice has involved studying these ancient texts, which have some very interesting ideas about the origin of life and the universe. So basically what I present as an alternative is that we should first understand that we're not just machines made of molecules. Most scientists today are proposing that we are essentially machines made of matter, and as far as mind and consciousness and things like that are concerned, they would say, well, those are byproducts of molecules interacting in the brain, and what we call mind and consciousness is produced by matter, but only temporarily. They would say at the time of death, when the molecules in the brain stop interacting, then there be no more consciousness, no more mind, anything like that. So it's a very materialistic, reductionistic picture of who we are and where we came from. Basically, they would just say we're like robots, robot molecular machines in competition with each other for survival. But I don't accept that. I think consciousness has its own independent existence apart from matter. Matter does not produce consciousness. Consciousness has its own existence, but consciousness can come into contact with matter and become embodied in matter. So I would say, as conscious beings, we do not evolve up from matter, as most scientists now believe. Rather, we devolve or come down from what I would call pure consciousness, and we've become associated with matter. But it's a process that can be reversed, and consciousness can be restored to its original pure state, freed from the limitations that are imposed on it by contact with matter, like birth and death.
Right. So tell me, Michael, what have been the response from mainstream science to your claims?
Well, that's a very good question. There have been a variety of responses. I break it down into three categories. There's one group of scientists who are very influential in the world of science today. I call them the fundamentalist materialist. And they don't appreciate what I'm saying very much at all. They don't want to hear it. They don't want anyone else to hear it. Sometimes if I'm scheduled to give a lecture at a university, for example, scientists in this category might try to get the lecture canceled. So that's one reaction, a very negative, dismissive reaction. But there's another group of scientists that's a little more open-minded. They may be supporters of the now dominant theories, but they support these theories for more or less purely scientific reasons. This other group that I was talking to, it seems to be more a matter of ideology with them. But this second group, they may be supporters of the current theories, but they're open-minded enough to be willing to listen to an alternative, to listen to evidence that may contradict the ideas that they now hold. And it's scientists in that category who have accepted my proposals to present papers about my work at major international scientific conferences. Actually, my latest book, it's titled My Science, My Religion, is a collection of 24 papers that I have presented at mainstream international scientific conferences on the kinds of topics that we've been discussing this evening. Archeological evidence for extreme human antiquity, evidence for consciousness existing apart from matter, and related topics. So I think it's a credit to the scientific community that there are scientists within the broader mainstream scientific community who are willing to give a hearing to alternative ideas. Sometimes the papers that I've presented at these conferences have been published in peer-reviewed scientific books and journals. So that's good. Now, these scientists may not agree with me, but they're willing to listen, which I think is important. And among those who are willing to listen, there are a small number who actually agree with me on some of the topics that I'm concerned about, like human antiquity and the existence of consciousness separate from matter. Now, scientists in that category are few in number these days, but we should keep in mind that the supporters of the now dominant theories back in the 19th century, for example, they were in the minority at one time also. So it's something that happens.
Michael, stand by. You and I have to take a short commercial break. We'll be right back. Exonation, Michael Cremo is my special guest this hour. www.mcremo.com. That's www.mcremo.com. This is the X Zone. My name is Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the X Zone Broadcast Network and the Starcom Radio Network. By the way, if you want to hear what radio during the day is really supposed to sound like, check out my friend Ed Till, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. until 5 p.m. Where? Right here on the Starcom Radio Network. Don't go away. Ever wondered if your advertising dollar is really working for you? If your ad would have been here, you and more than 4 million people would be listening to it right now. Contact ads at xzoneradiotv.com. Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com. Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifeology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com. Manifestation is driven by imagination, intent, and passion. In our culture, all three have been distorted and disabled by modern media and exploitation. Re-engage your imagination and your passion by entering into the world of paranormal romance. Kahir O'Donnell takes her readers on an exciting journey into the endless possibilities of loving, passionate, and mutually respectful male-female relationship. Her latest book, The Long Dark Night, features special ops adventure, a daring rescue, a psychic woman from the stars, and a special agent that will die to protect her. The Long Dark Night by Kahira O'Donnell is now available at kahiraodonnell.com or amazon.com.
Wouldn't you love to know the secret to everything? Well then, meet Dr. Kimberly McGeorge and her cutting-edge, breakthrough knowledge that combines science with possibility. Dr. Kimberly brings real-life answers and healing to those open to alternative solutions. She teaches solution-based programs and classes that will change all areas of your life forever. Specializing in conscious creation, intuitive readings, and energy medicine, you can rapidly shift health, relationships, business, and money in abundance challenges quickly. Receive her best-selling book, Secret to Everything, at no cost by going to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone. That's right, transformation can start now. Just go to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone and receive Dr. Kimberly's book for free.
Welcome back, everyone. Michael Cremo is our special guest this hour here in the X Zone. www.mcremo.com. That's MCREMO.com. Michael, what is your best single piece of evidence from your book, Forbidden Archeology?
Well, for me, the most important single fact is that there are so many of these cases of archaeological evidence for extreme human antiquity. To me, that's the most significant thing. Now, among those cases, I do have my favorites, and one of them I've already mentioned on the show this evening. It's the California gold mine discoveries. And what I particularly like about that case is not only is there an abundance of well-documented evidence for human bones and human artifacts being found in layers of rock about 50 million years old, according to modern geologists, there's also abundant evidence for what I call the process of knowledge filtration, by which these discoveries were eliminated from discussion in the scientific world. These discoveries were first announced to the scientific world by Dr. J.D. Whitney, who was a Harvard University-educated geologist who became the chief government geologist of California in the 19th century. And he published a massive study of these discoveries from the California gold mines. It was published by Harvard University in the year 1880. But we don't hear very much about these discoveries today because of the process of knowledge filtration that operates in the scientific world. And by that, I mean sometimes theoretical preconceptions. In other words, commitments to a dominant theory will influence how scientists react to evidence that comes to their attention. Evidence that tends to support a dominant theory will pass through this knowledge filter very easily, which means it makes its way into the textbooks and things like that. But if you've got evidence that radically contradicts a dominant idea, it gets filtered out, and that happened in the case of the California gold mine discoveries, and it's very well documented how it happened. There was a scientist, an anthropologist named William Holmes, who worked with the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., and when he heard about Dr. Whitney's reports, he wrote, if Dr. Whitney had understood the theory of human evolution, he wouldn't have published those conclusions that he did. In other words, if the facts contradicted the dominant theory, Whitney should have known the facts could not possibly be true. And that's how this process of knowledge filtration works. So as far as Holmes was concerned, those California gold mine discoveries deserve to be forgotten, and they were. Unless you're someone like me who digs beyond the current textbooks and you go back into the original scientific reports, you're not going to be aware of these things. So that's what I've tried to contribute to the general public I've tried to collect all of this information together and put it out for them to consider.
What attempts, if any, have been made to suppress you and your work?
Sometimes this happens. About 2 years ago, I was invited to speak at Google headquarters in California. Some of the people who work there wanted me to come and speak, and they have a program whereby Google employees can invite authors of books to come and present talks at Google headquarters. So I was invited, but some of the scientists and other employees at Google who were pretty much committed to the dominant ideas tried to get my talk canceled. They weren't successful at that, I'm happy to say. And this happens in other venues as well. So, if this sort of thing didn't happen every once in a while, I don't think I could call my topic forbidden archaeology. If I didn't, get forbidden, or people didn't attempt to forbid me every once in a while, my topic wouldn't have this name, forbidden archaeology. The reason I call it forbidden archaeology is because sometimes it actually is forbidden, or people attempt to forbid it.
What do you say about Lucy in your books?
Well, Lucy is the name that scientists gave to an ape-man, or ape-woman, if you will, that they found in the 1970s in Ethiopia. One of the lead investigators was Donald Johanson, archaeologist, physical anthropologist. This creature was given the scientific name Australopithecus afarensis. And this creature was about 3 feet tall, had some very ape-like characteristics. For example, an upward-pointing shoulder joint, kind of indicating that this creature, Lucy, was spending some time swinging from branches in trees. The foot bones of Lucy were very curved, like those of a chimpanzee, indicating that she was using her feet to grasp around branches. So the skeleton of this tiny little 3-foot ape lady was, in many respects, very ape-like, not very human-like at all. Now, the scientists who discovered this creature believe we evolved from her. In other words, we evolved from some primitive ape-like creature.
In Ethiopia.
I don't believe that myself. I don't think human beings like us evolved from apes and monkeys. I think there's abundant evidence showing that, yes, ape men existed in the ancient past, but humans like us existed alongside them. But the significance of the name Lucy is, I think it's a propaganda technique that scientists use to humanize, the ape men that they believe are our ancestors. If a person just read in a newspaper or heard, on radio or television or somewhere that scientists discovered Australopithecus afarensis in Ethiopia, it doesn't mean anything to them. But if they hear scientists discover Lucy,
right?
Well, your sister may be named Lucy, your mother may be named Lucy. You think, oh, I've got some relationship. She's like me. It humanizes the creature who is actually really quite ape-like. So I think it's a propaganda technique that supporters of the theory of evolution use to try to influence people to accept the little ape men or ape women that they find are somehow or other our real ancestors, our relatives, so to speak. Another case was when scientists and archaeologists in Indonesia on Flores Island discovered the bones of a creature that they gave the scientific name Homo floresiensis. Again, that just goes over most people's heads. They wouldn't pause to even think about it very much. But they decided to give it the name Hobbit. So then you think, wow, Hobbit, scientists find Hobbit. Wow, that's cool. So again, this attachment of humanizing names, Lucy, is, I think, a propaganda technique used by the supporters of the theory of evolution to try to convince people that these little ape-like creatures they're discovering are actually our ancestors.
It sounds like marketing 101.
Marketing 101 it is. Because actually they need research money, and if you're making discoveries that get a lot of attention in the newspapers and in the media, then that's helpful for getting further usually tax-supported funding for your research.
And that's what it's all about. You need funding to continue research.
Absolutely.
Now, Michael, what are some of the archaeological topics that are explored in your book, The Forbidden Archaeologist?
Yeah, well, The Forbidden Archaeologist is a collection of columns that I write for Atlantis Rising magazine.
A great magazine.
That magazine comes out 6 times a year. I have a regular column in it called The Forbidden Archaeologist, and I've collected 50 of those columns and put them out in a book called The Forbidden Archaeologist. And it deals with a lot of different topics that I concern myself with. For example, the topic of extreme human antiquity, the idea that humans like us existed much further back in time than 200,000 years ago. I also touch on another related topic, the history of archaeology in India. Many times people think, historians claim, archaeologists claim that archaeology began when the Europeans came there. So what I've shown is that actually the people in India had their own independent tradition of archaeology. And it's the same with many other traditional groups of people around the world. They have their own sense of history and their own sense of archaeology. So that in truth, really, you could say there's not just one archaeology, there are many different archaeologies. There's a First Peoples archaeology, there's an Australian Aboriginal archaeology, there's a Western scientific archaeology, there's an ancient Indian archaeology. So, and there are some archaeologists today who understand this. Actually, the scientific journal published by the World Archaeological Congress, one of the world's largest international organization of archaeologists, is called Archeologies in the plural.
What genetic evidence do you discuss in your book, Human Devolution?
Of course, that's an idea that some people say, well, we don't just have to rely on the stones and bones we can find in the layers of the earth. We can look at the genetic evidence. And some scientists will claim that the genetic evidence supports the dominant theories. But in my book, Human Devolution, I look at this evidence very carefully and show that it's not really so clear that the genetic evidence says what the supporters of the theory of evolution say it does.
Right.
It's more or less becomes like a circular kind of argument.
You know, time goes by so fast when you're with us, Michael. We've got about 3 or 4 minutes left. What are you up to in the near future? Where are you going to be? Where might our listeners have the opportunity of hearing you speak?
Well, your listeners in Canada may be interested to know that at the end of August, I'm going to be speaking about forbidden archaeology in Vancouver and Victoria in British Columbia.
Right.
And that is part of an event called the Modern Knowledge Tour.
Mm-hmm.
And on Saturday, the 29th of August, I'll be speaking in Vancouver as part of the Modern Knowledge Tour. And on Sunday, the 30th of August, I'll be speaking on forbidden archaeology in Victoria. And there'll be other speakers as well at this Modern Knowledge Tour event. And if people want to learn a little bit more about the details of all of that, they can go to modernknowledgetour.ca, for Canada, modernknowledgetour.ca. And they have a website. You just click on your city, Victoria or Vancouver,
mm-hmm.
and they'll get all the details about those events. And it would be really nice to see some of the X-Zone listeners at those events.
Well, you know what? You've always been one of our favorite guests here on the show. I love what you do, and I have been one of the people who pushed the envelope by saying, listen, history has lied. What else do we not know? What is the truth? Why the suppression? And Michael Cremo, thank you for being the forbidden archaeologist, for getting all this information out. It's always a great pleasure talking to you. What are your final thoughts for the X-Zone Nation?
Well, I think you've raised some very important questions there. I think these questions, who am I, where did I come from, are extremely important, because it's on the basis of those questions that we come up with our goals, our values, our plans in life. And, the answers, we've been getting to those questions from our scientists and the mainstream scientific community are very materialistic. So to me, it's not very surprising that our whole worldwide human civilization has become extremely materialistic. We're being told we're just machines made of matter in competition with each other for survival. So I think that is at the root of many of the world's problems. I think if we had a different set of answers to these fundamental questions, who am I, where did I come from, with a more spiritual basis to them, we'd have a much more peaceful, less environmentally destructive world.
Michael, once again, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Also, thank Lori very much for her work in making this interview possible, and I wish you continued success and safe travels, my friend.
You're quite welcome.
Have a nice evening, Michael.
Good night.
X-Zone Nation. Michael Cremo has been my very special guest this hour. He's the author of Forbidden Archaeology and a number of great books. Check out his website at www.mcremo.com. That's www.mcremo.com. Now, I'll be back on the other side of this news break at the top of the hour. Many of you are probably saying, well, wait a minute. We don't hear any news. The news is put in by different networks. Some networks put in the news. Other networks, well, we just play our spots. That's why I always say at the top of the hour after the news. So, until I come back on the other side of the top of the hour, this is Rob McConnell. You're listening to us live and around the world from the X-Zone radio show and our studios and corporate offices in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Michael Cremo, what a guy. Once again, his website, www.mcremo.com. And if you'd like to read the scientific report that was published by a guest we had last night, Mitchell Townsend, who has scientific evidence that Bigfoot really does exist. Go to www.rel-mar.com/SDB. I'll be back on the other side as we continue here in the X Zone on the X Zone Broadcast Network and the Starcom Radio Network.